Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Gillette, and I'm a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador. That's a fancy way of saying I'm a volunteer for NASA. The Solar System Ambassador program is a joint venture between NASA and JPL based in Pasadena, California. I've been a Solar System Ambassador now for about 2 years. Monthly, I host these YouTube live events where I put on an event about a variety of different topics. I'd like to ask you that if you've not subscribed as of yet, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'd like to announce my events for the next 3 months. On Sunday, January the 24th, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I will be hosting a live virtual star party. Of course, that's weather permitting. On Thursday, February the 18th, starting at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I will be doing a live NASA simulcast of the landing of the Perseverance rover on Mars. And on Sunday, March the 21st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be talking about the basics of astrophotography. All you need to do to join me for any of these upcoming events is come back to my YouTube channel about 5 minutes before the event time and look for the live event. So I hope you can join me for one or all of these upcoming 2021 winter events. So before we get started tonight, I do want to ask, as I normally do, if for those of you who are watching, if you would be so kind to put in the chat box how you heard about tonight's event. In addition, you can at any time type any questions that you have about tonight's event in the chat box, and I have recruited again the assistance of my husband Spencer, and he's going to do a shout out.
Hello, everybody.
All right. And so he's going to monitor the chat box for me. It's very challenging to put the presentation on and to monitor the chat box. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and he will periodically let me know that there's a question there so that I can get that addressed for you. So we've got just about an hour and I have a lot of things that I'd like to talk to you about. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I do want to welcome everyone. Regardless if you heard about me from a library or from the Night Sky Network or from Valencia College where I teach as a sociology professor, perhaps one or more of my former students might be attending, family, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And before I show you tonight's agenda, I want to just very quickly talk about a very big event that will be occurring tomorrow, an astronomical event, and that's the Great Conjunction of 2020. And you've probably heard that Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, and Saturn will be at their closest point from our perspective, from our visual perspective, in hundreds of years. So a couple nights ago with my telescope, put my pointer on here, I took this picture with my telescope. Now my telescope is geared towards deep sky objects and not planetary work. And so that's why you're seeing kind of like little white dots on the screen. But I will point out to you what we're looking at. This is the planet Jupiter on the left-hand side. This is the planet Saturn on the right-hand side. We can see 4 of the Galilean moons, and I believe, starting from the left-hand side, we have the moon Ganymede, followed by Europa, Io, and Callisto. And over here, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this may be a moon of Saturn. It probably is the moon Titan. So tomorrow is the big event. Wherever you are watching this from, tomorrow night go out right around sunset time, look in the western sky, the southwestern part of the sky near the horizon, and you will see again, from our perspective, Jupiter and Saturn, the closest that they have appeared in hundreds of years. Now, are they really that close? No, they're millions of miles apart, but it's from our perspective that they look like they're very close together. So a very exciting event. Make sure that you get outside and you get to take a look at that. All right, I'm going to make a small adjustment here on the screen, and then I'm going to show you tonight's agenda. So let me go ahead and miniaturize myself and put myself down in the corner. Once my okay, go back here. Let me minimize myself so that the focus is the presentation instead of me. And we'll go back here, and we'll go here. All right, so here's tonight's agenda. Very briefly, I want to talk about the history of rocketry. And then I have decided the best way to present my presentation on rockets is based on organizations. I'm going to start with some domestic organizations, of course, starting with NASA. We talk about SpaceX, the United Launch Alliance, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic. And then I've chosen two foreign organizations, the Russian Space Agency and the European Space Agency. And then at the end of the presentation, whatever remaining time we have, we will do Q&A. Over on the right-hand side of your screen is a picture that I took of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket sitting on the launch pad ready for launch at Cape Canaveral Space Launch Complex 40 on April 8th, 2016. And a little bit later in tonight's presentation, when I show you and talk about SpaceX, I will be showing you that actual launch that I had the opportunity to see up close. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history of rocketry. Rockets that launch spacecraft today can be traced back to Germany in the 1930s. Though there were earlier rocketeers, Robert Goddard launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in 1926, and he's on the left-hand side of your screen. There was extensive research on rockets in Germany and the Soviet Union in the 1930s and 1940s. Germany developed and used the V-2 rocket, which was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile during World War II. Following World War II, the Russians, the British, and the US wanted the knowledge of the Germans, including the gentleman that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. That's Wernher von Braun. He would eventually lead NASA's Saturn Apollo program, landing humans on the moon. All right, it takes an enormous amount of energy to boost a spacecraft into orbit. Rockets powered by explosive chemical reactions are still the only vehicles capable of getting to space. A rocket is propelled by a jet of gas produced by burning fuel. Oxygen is needed to burn the fuel. Boosters, solid rocket boosters, give the maximum power necessary to lift a rocket off the ground. Most of a rocket's size and weight is fuel. A rocket accelerates slowly at the beginning of its flight when it is at its heaviest. As the rocket rapidly burns fuel, it becomes lighter. The lighter it is, the faster it accelerates. It climbs vertically at first and then tilts over further and further until it is flying horizontally as it reaches its orbital height. Fuel can make up 90% of the weight of a rocket. Rockets are very large because it takes a lot of fuel space to overcome a standing start from the ground and reach the required speed and altitude. Now tonight I can't possibly talk about every organization and every rocket that's ever been built. And so here's a very, very short list of some of the things I will not be talking about. I will not be talking about the Antares or the Titan rockets. Unfortunately, because of lack of time, I won't be talking about companies like Rocket Lab, Orbital Sciences Corporation, the Chinese National Space Administration, or the Indian Space Research Organization. All right, so there's a lot of stuff I'm going to be leaving out tonight, but hopefully I have selected the best, and I think the best means we start with NASA.
We had a question, what are rocket boosters?
Rocket boosters, solid rocket boosters. So a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to be showing you some pictures, and solid rocket boosters generally are attached to the side of the main rocket or a fuel tank. And once you light a solid rocket booster, that rocket is going. There's no way of shutting it off once you light it up. So I'll be showing you some pictures just a little bit later on solid rocket boosters. All right, NASA. NASA, created in the late 1950s, has done quite a bit in its 60-year history. NASA has used a large variety of rockets in its 60-year history to launch satellites and astronauts. So let's take a look first at the Mercury Redstone, which derived from the U.S. Army's Redstone ballistic missile. So you see that a lot of the first rockets came from military use. So this rocket used on May 5th, 1961 to bring NASA astronaut Alan Shepard into a low Earth suborbital trajectory for a 15-minute flight, putting the first American astronaut into space. This same rocket, the Mercury Redstone, was used again in July of 1961 to launch NASA astronaut Gus Grissom. Now, John Glenn became the first NASA astronaut to orbit the Earth, and he was launched aboard an Atlas rocket in February of 1962. Now, I would imagine that perhaps the most well-known of all of NASA's rockets is the Saturn V, and the Saturn V is named the Saturn V because of the 5 main engines that you can see down here at the very bottom, the 5 main engines. This rocket is a super heavy lift launch vehicle with 3 stages, each filled with liquid propellants. It was designed by the gentleman that I showed you just a moment ago, Wernher von Braun. Stage 1, which is the lowest stage at the bottom right here, stage 1, used RP1 or rocket propellant, which is a highly refined form of kerosene. Stages 2 and 3 used liquid hydrogen. This rocket, the Saturn V, had the capacity to lift 48 tons. Keep that number in mind because we'll be talking about the space shuttle in just a moment, and we're going to compare the lifting capability of the Saturn V versus the space shuttle. Okay, got a short little video here that I would like to show you about the Saturn V rocket.
We have been given the scientific knowledge, the technical ability, and the materials to pursue the exploration of the universe. To ignore these great resources would be a corruption of a God-given ability.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
right, so that's NASA's Saturn V rocket. Let's go forward and let's talk about the space shuttle. Now, NASA's space shuttle was not a rocket per se, it was a shuttle. And so there was a question earlier about the solid rocket booster. So over on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the actual orbiter here attached to the main fuel tank, and these two thin rocket appearing things are the solid rocket boosters. All right. So what happens is when when a space shuttle was launched, they would start by igniting the three RS-25 engines right here. You can see them also here. And once they were started and at full power and ready to go, then they would light the solid rocket boosters, because once these are lit, you're going. There's no way of stopping the launch. So they always wanted to make sure that the main engines on the shuttle itself were up and running at full capacity before lighting the solid rocket boosters. And I'm going to show you a launch of a space shuttle in just a moment, and we can actually see that happen. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, there were three RS-25 engines, liquid fuel, cryogenic, and then two SRBs, or solid rocket boosters. The SRBs provided about 71% of the thrust. All right. I guess this video wanted to start here, so we're going to go ahead and turn that off. All right. Okay, so again, let me repeat that. This is worth repeating. These two solid rocket boosters right here, that one and that one, provided about 71% of the thrust needed to launch the entire space shuttle. Now, the space shuttle had the capability of lifting 32 tons, okay? And that was compared to, as I mentioned earlier, the Saturn V had the capability of lifting 48 tons. So the space shuttle did not have all of the lift capability of the Saturn V. And the reason for that is because when going to the moon, you have to escape the Earth's gravity. All right, when the space shuttle would go up, the space shuttle would only go up about 250 miles roughly above the Earth and did not completely escape the gravity of the Earth. So to go to the moon, you have to have more lifting power, and you have to go faster. I believe it's about 22,500 miles per hour, whereas the space shuttle would go at about 17,500 miles per hour. Okay. There were 5 shuttles: Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Endeavour, and Atlantis. There were 135 flights for the space shuttle program. I'm sure that most of you know that we did lose 2 of the shuttles. We lost the Challenger shuttle when it exploded on liftoff in 1986, and then we lost the Columbia when it was returning to the Kennedy Space Center. It disintegrated over the states of California and Louisiana, and that it was in 2003. All right, so I've got a little video here I'd like to show you about the space shuttle. And I'm going to start this at the 4-minute mark.
Traveling 3,200 miles an hour. Hardware and humans taking aim.
Let's see. Actually, I'm going to start it right there.
20.
Watch when they're getting ready to launch. You're going to see the main engines come on first. There you go.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station. Atlantis now in the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the international outpost. 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis almost 2 miles in altitude, almost 6 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center already, traveling 500 miles an hour. The 3 liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% of rated performance, going into the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier. 55 seconds into the flight, all systems operating normally, 900 miles an hour. The speed of Atlantis right now, 6 miles in altitude, 9 miles downrange.
Atlantis, go with throttle up.
Copy, go with throttle up.
The throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Charlie Hobaugh, joined on the flight deck by pilot Butch Wilmore, flight engineer Randy Bresnick, and Leland Melvin, seated down on the mid-deck are Mike Foreman and Bobby Satcher, kicking off their work week with a Monday commute to orbit. 1 minute, 30 seconds into the flight, Atlantis 13 miles in altitude, 15 miles downrange, traveling almost 2,000 miles an hour. Three good auxiliary power units, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good main engines. One minute, 50 seconds into the flight, 10 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation. Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging. Atlantis steering into the center lane of Highway 129 en route to the International Space Station. 2 minutes, 20.
All right. Pretty exciting stuff. So as I mentioned, the 3 main engines, you saw them start. Once they can confirm that they were at full capacity, then they light the solid rocket boosters, because once these are lit, the shuttle is launching, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it. All right, so the shuttle program started officially in 1981, and the last shuttle, Atlantis, landed at the Kennedy Space Center, which was mission 135, in 2011, so quite a few years ago. All right, so that's a little bit about the history of some of the rockets of NASA. So what's coming up? Here's what's coming up, something very exciting. It's time for us to go back to the moon and on to Mars. And NASA's building a new rocket to get us to the moon and to Mars. And it is called the Space Launch System, for short SLS. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see the rocket. And you will see some components from both the Saturn V that I spoke about, what we use to go to the moon, and the space shuttle. All right, this big tank here is a fuel tank. That's stage 1. All right, so that comes from both the shuttle and the Saturn V. And there you have 2 solid rocket boosters on the side, okay, coming from the space shuttle program. This is where either the cargo will go or the astronauts will go. If it's astronauts, they will be in the Orion capsule, okay? If they are simply using this rocket to bring some cargo into space, then they will put the cargo up here. NASA announced the name of the program and came up with this official design. I believe it was earlier this year. And the Artemis program is our return to the moon. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. Here's a little information about the SLS. The SLS is a super heavy lift launch vehicle. It's using the space shuttle engines, the RS-25. The space shuttle had 3. The SLS will have 4 RS-25 engines. There will be what's called a green test coming up very soon. I highly recommend that if you don't go to the nasa.gov website, and you really like this kind of stuff, and I'm assuming that you do because you're here with me tonight, bookmark that page and go back there periodically, because there's a lot of really neat things going on in preparation for the first launch of the SLS. And one is called the Green Test, which they will be testing all of the components for the engines all together. They have not announced a date as of yet, but it should be coming relatively soon, perhaps as early as next month. Okay? So this will be the most powerful rocket that has ever flown. It is evolvable, which means that you see 4 different variations here. SLS Block 1, Block 1B Crew, Block 1B Cargo, Block 2 Cargo. And again, so you can see that if we're putting crew at the top, there's the Orion capsule. That's where the astronauts will go, here and here. If they're putting cargo, they're going to put these fairings to cover up the cargo, and then those fairings will come off once they get into orbit. The first full test of the Space Launch System, Artemis 1 as it's called, is currently scheduled for fall of 2021. So hopefully within the next year. I'm not exactly sure, nor has NASA announced if COVID has delayed this first scheduled launch. So we can keep our fingers crossed and hope that they're still able to launch the system. The Artemis 1 launch will bring this SLS rocket around the moon several times and bring it back to Earth. There will be no astronauts on board. Currently, Artemis 2 launch is scheduled for somewhere between 2022 and 2023. This will have astronauts on board. They will launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. They will go around the moon and return to Earth. They will not land on the moon for Artemis 2. And NASA is still stating that the third Artemis launch, which is scheduled for 2024, that there will be astronauts, once again, the first woman and the next man landing on the moon. This same rocket, the SLS rocket, will be used to take us to the planet Mars sometime in the 2030s. Got a short video here about NASA's SLS rocket.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
Boy, very, very exciting. They're starting to call this the second age of space exploration. The first one, of course, being back in the 1960s and 70s when we went to the moon. Spencer pointed out that there's a question in the chat box about what year was it, and I believe that's referring to either the Space Shuttle Challenger or Space Shuttle Columbia accidents. The Space Shuttle Challenger exploded about 70 seconds after liftoff in 1986, and Challenger was again returning from space, and it was flying over Texas and Louisiana, headed back to the Kennedy Space Center to land, and that was in 2003. So I hope that I answered your question. And what shuttle video did you play? You know what I do is I get most of my videos from NASA. NASA has an awesome YouTube channel, and so if you've not checked out their YouTube channel, whenever I can, I normally get my videos from NASA, either NASA Direct or one of the agencies that, or one of the centers that works with NASA, like Houston or Kennedy Space Center. So I believe it's a NASA video on YouTube. All right, so that's the Space Launch System. Pretty exciting. All right, so now let's kind of switch gears and go away from a government program, NASA, to talking about a couple private organizations and what they're doing. And so up first we have the Space Exploration Technology Corporation, better known simply as SpaceX. It's been founded by Elon Musk, and you see his picture up on the left-hand side of the screen. All right, so SpaceX, when it first was being developed back in the early 2000s, developed the first Falcon 9 rocket and a Falcon 1 rocket. And they called it Falcon 1 because it had one Merlin engine. Okay, this became the first privately developed liquid fuel launch vehicle to go into orbit in 2008. So it took them quite a number of years to design the rocket and to finally get it into orbit. Now on the left hand, kind of on the middle of your screen here, you see some information about the Falcon 9 rocket. It's named Falcon 9 because it has 9 Merlin engines. It is a medium lift launch vehicle with 2 stages. Stage 1 is recoverable. And so if you ever watch any SpaceX launch, to me at least, the most exciting part of the launch is not actually the launch itself, which is very exciting. It's actually the first stage of the rocket returning back to either very near to where it landed, or launched, or on a barge out in the ocean. And I'm going to be showing you a video here in just a moment of at least the launch. The engines use cryogenic liquid oxygen and rocket-grade kerosene. SpaceX has been used to supply the International Space Station with supplies. It has also just recently been used to ferry NASA astronauts to the International Space Station. Earlier this year, I believe it was in May, there were 2 astronauts, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, launched on the top of a Falcon 9 rocket. Up here was the Crew Dragon. They rode in, and they were the test pilots for this new program that SpaceX is running for NASA. Now, just, let's see, we're in December, so when was this? Just a couple months ago, late July, early August, NASA sent its first official crew to the International Space Station. All right, and there were 4 astronauts on board, so they are currently at the International Space Station. When NASA retired the space shuttles back in 2011, it left a gap, and the gap was, how do we get our U.S. astronauts back and forth to the International Space Station? And what we have been doing is relying on the Russians with their Soyuz rockets to ferry astronauts back and forth for us, since we had no launch vehicles to get them there. The problem is, it is extremely expensive for us to pay the Russians to do that. So SpaceX has come along and will be doing that same job for a lot less, which allows NASA to take that money and use it on other programs. All right, on the right-hand side of the screen here, you see the Falcon Heavy. Basically, the Falcon Heavy is 3 Falcon 9 rockets all strapped together. It has 27 Merlin engines. So basically, the Falcon 9 has 9 times 3, you get 27 engines. It is a heavy lift launch vehicle. It has 2 stages, and it first launched in 2018. Okay. Up in the left-hand side of your screen, you see a picture that I took of a Falcon 9 rocket on Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, getting ready to launch. This is a picture of a launch, not my picture, but a launch of a Falcon 9 rocket. And here are some specs for the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. You can see that this is the first stage here, and this is the landing gear. Okay, so when this first stage separates from the second stage continues into orbit. The first stage comes back and it lands, again, either on land or on a barge in the ocean. All right, if you have never seen a rocket launch up close and you're watching me tonight, you definitely want to put this on your bucket list. I've wanted so long to be able to see a rocket launch up close, and finally had that opportunity about 4 years. I have a friend that works at the Kennedy Space Center as an engineer, and she got me in, and so I want to show you my experience of seeing a Falcon 9 rocket launch.
Wow. You hear the sound, it'll be about 40 seconds. See it? So that's why I said don't listen to that. Here it comes.
I see a question from Jen, and the question is this my own video? Yes, this is my own video. I was holding the camera, I was trying to zoom in, and you know that when you do that, it's very hard to hold the camera still, so that's why it looks like it's kind of going all over the place. It's probably a combination of my zooming in so far to get a nice close-up view and all of my excitement for getting ready to see. I was about 3 miles from the launch pad when this was launched, so if you've never seen a launch, I highly recommend it. You've got to get it on your bucket list. All right, so currently, what else is SpaceX up to? Well, SpaceX is developing a whole new, brand new, huge rocket. And it was once called the BFR, or the Big Falcon Rocket. It has since been renamed Starship. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, sees this as the interplanetary vehicle. He wants to take hundreds of humans to live on Mars, and this is the rocket that he wants to use to get that to happen. They had a test launch within the last 2 weeks of Starship. This is only the top stage of the rocket. There's a whole entire lower stage to this. And they did this launch, so I'm going to I'm going to bring us to the actual launch. Again, this was about 2 weeks ago, I believe. But this was an incredible, and I'm getting this off of the internet here. I was not there. This was actually in Texas. They're doing this in southeast Texas. So let's go here. All right, so watch this launch of the Starship. It did not end well, by the way, and you're going to see that.
Stage route is go for flight. T-minus 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
All right, so again, this is the rocket that Elon Musk
Triage alarms.
is developing to take humans to Mars. This is only the top stage, only a very small part of the entire rocket. Launched from the east coast of Texas. You can see the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, I'm sorry, right there. There's the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward us to when it lands, because they're going to land this thing. Now you're going to see something pretty dramatic happen, and as I said a moment ago, it didn't end well, but actually it did end well because they were able to gather a lot of information from what happened. So if you didn't actually get to see this occur, you're in for quite a treat in just a moment. All right, let's watch this thing land. So they're landing it right back very close to where it launched. I think it was within a few miles, if I'm not mistaken. And Elon Musk is all into reusability. It's a very big part of his business model. He likes to say, if you were to fly from New York to, let's say, Paris and throw away the plane every time, it would be very expensive for people to fly. And that's what we basically have been doing with rockets. We can't continue to throw them away. It's too expensive. So we need to learn how to reuse what has already been built. And so watch this land so that it can be reused. All right, here it goes. And there you go. As I said, it didn't end very well. It blew up, coming down a little too fast, a little too heavy. But the people that work at SpaceX are not disappointed. Actually, were kind of expecting this to occur. They weren't surprised, and they were able to get a lot of good information and data so that when they launch the next one, they can make sure that this doesn't happen again. So that's a little bit of information about Starship and SpaceX. That launch that you just saw was on December the 9th. Okay, so just a couple, 2.5 weeks ago. Let's go on and talk about another commercial company, and that's ULA, or the United Launch Alliance. This is a joint venture between two companies, Lockheed Martin and Boeing. A large variety of rockets are in their fleet, and basically it's the Atlas and Delta series. And here you see the Delta rockets, And here you see the Atlas rockets. This is a picture that I took of the Delta IV Heavy on Cape Canaveral's Launch Complex 37 in April of 2016. They were getting ready to launch one of their largest rocket to date. All right, currently under development is their Vulcan Centaur rocket. Vulcan is a heavy lift launch vehicle that will replace the Delta IV Heavy that I just spoke about a moment ago. The first stage will use liquid methane and liquid oxygen. Now, United Launch Alliance uses some Russian-made engines. Others are made domestically, for example, by a company called Aerojet Rocketdyne. To date, their rockets are not reusable, which creates long-term problems as compared to SpaceX. As I mentioned a moment ago, if you're using an airplane one time and throwing it away, it's going to be very, very expensive to fly people where they want to go. And that's what we've been doing with rockets. So SpaceX has decided, no, we can't continue to do that. We need to reuse our rockets. And up until now, ULA has not been reusing their rockets. However, with this new rocket, they do have plans to reuse part of it. All right. Let's go ahead and go on to the next company. I'm sure that many of you know this gentleman down in the right-hand corner. His name is Jeff Bezos. He's the gentleman who founded Amazon. And back in the year 2000, he founded a company called Blue Origin. This is a privately funded aerospace manufacture and suborbital space flight services company. And what Mr. Bezos would like to do is he would like to take this rocket here on the left-hand side and send tourists into space. The name of that rocket is the New Glenn. This is a vertical takeoff and vertical landing rocket using reusable capabilities. Blue Origin was the first to successfully vertically land their New Shepard rocket in 2015. So a lot of people, SpaceX is very well known for their reusability and landing of their first stage rockets. However, it was actually Blue Origin that did it first. Okay.
So there's a question about the UAL use the Boeing Starliner.
So that's a very good question. For those who are not familiar with Starliner, the CST-100 as they call it, that is the Boeing version of SpaceX's Crew Dragon. Back in December of 2019, ULA launched Boeing's Starliner, and it was supposed to dock with the International Space Station. However, there were some software problems. Because of that, it never docked. Ever since then, Boeing has been refurbishing and doing reprogramming of the Starliner, and currently there is a new date set for launch, and that new date, I believe, is March 31st. All right, I believe it's March 31st of 2021, where ULA will once again launch Boeing's Starliner, CST-100, and hopefully it will make it to the International Space Station this time. If it does make it there, then the next launch of the Starliner will have astronauts on board, and they will ferry them to the International Space Station. So good question. Boeing's Starliner. All right, let me show you a quick little video about Blue Origin's New Shepard, and this was named after Alan Shepard, our first astronaut. Now this, I believe, is going to have an ad in it, so you're going to have to bear with me, and I am going to start, let's see, I'm going to start this video at the 36-minute mark. So I believe, again, there's going to be a commercial. I can't get around the commercial, so we're just going to have to deal with it.
I can see those fins moving there. It's a great sign.
Fast. I actually just had it happen the other day when I was walking into Starbucks. Some guy came up and goes, "How do you have such a good body?"
So this is the
Like on an
launch.
airplane, you test your control surfaces before you take off. That's what we do on New Shepard. In a moment, you might see the engine gimbal there, the BE3 engine.
So this is the Blue
Those
Origin
control
New
surfaces are
Shepard
gonna go to work as that booster
rocket. This is being
descends
launched
from space today.
from
There you
Western
go, you see
Texas.
the engine gimbaling. Powerful LOX hydrogen BE3 engine. All right, our hearts are racing over here. We're about T-minus 36 seconds. We're going to turn it over to mission control. Godspeed. Have a great flight.
So the tourist would be able to sit inside the capsule, and they have these huge windows. Suborbital flights. So it send tourists up to suborbital flight, and you could look out the window for about 15 minutes or so, and then you come back
12, 11, 10, 9,
to save your money up.
7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1.
All right, look at her go. Mission control has confirmed New Shepard has cleared the tower. Check out that shot from our drone. On her way to space. Lunar landing tech on board. Payloads inside. You can see at the top right of your screen there, New Shepard's gaining speed. That BE3 engine is really doing its work. What a clean burn.
Okay, I'm going to advance us to the landing part.
First milestone here is max Q.
So this is it coming back and landing.
See the booster's speed is slowing down rapidly here as it gets closer to the pad. You were down in Texas, you'd hear a sonic boom any second, almost knocks you off your feet. It's so exciting. All right, there go the drag brakes. Here we go, we're getting close. Now we're just waiting for that BE3 engine to relight.
You could hear the sonic booms there.
There we go. All right. Come on, Shepard, let's go. Wow. Look at that stability.
So stable.
Touch
Oh my God.
down. New Shepard. Here we
All right, so there you go. Pretty exciting stuff. Blue Origin is very much into reusability like SpaceX, and that's the companies that are doing that are definitely going to save a lot of money and be able to lower cost. All right, I see we're running short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to New Glenn. I want to talk quickly about Virgin Galactic. Virgin Galactic is an American company that's developing commercial spacecraft for suborbital space flights for space tourists, just like Blue Origin. This was founded by Richard Branson, and you can see his picture right here. And he's developing a very different way of getting us into space. Rather than launching on a rocket, they have a plane, and they go up to, I think it's about 50,000 feet, and then they drop the rocket, and then the rocket will ignite and take off from there. Why? Well, it's going to save a lot of fuel by launching the rocket by dropping it from a plane rather than launching it from ground level. I highly recommend, if you want to see a really neat, cool website, check out the Virgin Galactic website, virgingalactic.com. And I'm just going to show you just a second of it here. Takes a moment to load. But definitely go to virgingalactic.com. It's probably one of the neatest websites I've ever been to. Alright. There's the plane that's used to bring the rocket up to altitude before it launches. Alright, so I'm going to leave that at that. Alright. All right, so I want to talk very quickly about two other government organizations. The first one is the Russian government. In the U.S., we call our organization NASA. In Russia, they call it Roscosmos. And you can see how they actually spell it down here at the bottom. The Russians have a long history of using what they have called the Soyuz rocket, which means in Russian means union. Over 1,700 flights have been launched since 1966, making the Soyuz the most frequently used launch vehicle in the world. And indeed, the rockets that are used for Soyuz are renowned for being among the best rocket engines in the world. Most Soyuz rockets use RP-1, which is a kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen mix. All right. These are not reusable rockets. However, the Russians are reporting that they are working on a new Soyuz rocket, and that one is reported to have some reusability capabilities. And the other organization I want to talk about is the European Space Agency, or ESA. And ESA works with Arianespace. Arianespace does the launches, whereas ESA is kind of the planning mechanism of the European Space Agency. So Arianespace is a European company, and it was founded in 1980 as the world's first commercial launch service provider. And you can see some of the rockets that Arianespace uses, and the most used one is the Ariane 5, and you can see that here on the left-hand side of your screen. All right, well, we're just about at the top of the hour. I'd like to show you a little video here that I put together. You and I probably will not start a rocket launch company or rocket development company anytime soon. You and I probably will not have the opportunity to go into space. However, you and I probably can afford going out and buying some model rockets, and they can be a lot of fun, and they're good for kids of all ages. Even my age. I started doing this just a few years ago, and it's just a lot of fun to build them and to launch them and to see them come down and hopefully come down in one piece. There I am running, trying to see if I can see where it lands, because they're kind of hard to find when you don't see them go down. So this is a video that I put together of several different model rocket launches over the last couple months. So I encourage you to go and take a look at this. I did have a malfunction on one of them, and I'm not sure where it is in this video, but if you go to my YouTube channel and look for model rocket launch compilation, you can see that one of them didn't go very well. Well, in fact, the engine came loose and only the engine flew up and launched instead of the entire rocket. All right, check out this website, Flight Club. Flightclub.io has a lot of good information about launches. Here's the best website to check out for launch schedules, spaceflightnow.com. I use this all the time. SpaceX, ULA, NASA, Russia, ESA, every launch all around the world will be listed on spaceflightnow.com. So definitely check that website out. All right, so I want to thank you for joining me tonight. Again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. Here's my upcoming program. The 24th, I'm going to have a live virtual star party. First live virtual star party, so it will be dependent on good weather. Thursday, February 18th, Very important day for NASA, and I'm going to be doing a live NASA simulcast of the landing of the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover on Mars. So please come and join me for that live simulcast. And Sunday, March 21st, we'll be talking about the basics of astrophotography. All right. Any questions that you would like me to address before we call it a night? Please feel free to put them in the chat box. Now again, I highly appreciate you joining me tonight. I hope that you are going to have an awesome holiday season as we are upon the holidays. We have a new year coming up, and many people, including myself, are looking forward to 2021. 2020 has certainly been a very interesting year. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you back for my winter series starting in January for the live star party. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.